One of the easiest ways to kill momentum is to not recognize it when it happens. Something comes along, an opportunity, and you're busy chuckling because you're thinking, how crazy is that? Then pretty soon the moment's gone, right? They're called sparks for a reason. They don't last unless you've built the kindling, which is all the work you do in advance, and you fan the flames, which is what you do after the spark takes hold.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Duct Tape Marketing Podcast. This is John Jantsch. My guest today is Don Yaeger. He's a New York Times bestselling author, leadership expert, and sought-after speaker. Deep experience interviewing world-class athletes, coaches, and business leaders, Don has distilled the secrets of high performance into a practical framework. His latest book, The New Science of Momentum, challenges conventional wisdom and offers a research-backed playbook for leaders who want to achieve sustained success. So, Don, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, thank you so much. Looking forward to it.
Should we see how many sports cliches we can use in this?
You know what? I don't know. I feel like I'm already in the bottom of the ninth. I mean, because anyway, go ahead.
So, well, just take it one question at a time. That's all you could do, right? So, speaking of cliches, you argue that momentum isn't just a cliche, it's a science. What made you tackle this topic?
So, like many of your listeners probably, I was watching the Super Bowl a few years ago when the New England Patriots fell behind to the Atlanta Falcons 28-3. And the prognosticators said Atlanta had a 99.4% chance of winning the game at that stage. Yeah. Most of America turned the game off because it was over. And then suddenly, Tom Brady runs, 12 yards on on 3rd and 8. Tom Brady hadn't run 12 yards all season long, right? That's not who he is. And one little thing after another started stacking up. And pretty soon, as we all know, New England created the greatest comeback in the history of the Super Bowl. And I watched, and at the end of the game, Joe Buck said this great line. He said, New England has redefined the word momentum tonight. So the next morning I came in, opened up the whiteboard in my office, brought in the creative team that works for me, and just wrote the words, how do you turn a moment into momentum? How can momentum be manufactured? Can we engineer it? Can we build it? Or is it we just have to wait on something good to happen? And that started an 8-year project interviewing the best leaders in the world in the worlds of sports, politics, the military, and business to try to understand how do they construct momentum?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because I think most people probably think in terms of like momentum, something you just get caught up in.
Right.
It takes you, it carries you, right?
Right.
And you argue
that can be true, by the way. Yeah. But the great ones don't wait on it.
I was going to say, since you're arguing it can be engineered, are there like triggers or things that you found that start, that process?
There are actually. A big piece of it is, in fact, in the book, we actually built a model for how momentum can be constructed in your organization. And what's interesting is I used to think it always began with a spark, something that happened, right? What I grew to understand from talking to these great leaders is that there's an entire framework of effort that is created before the spark. And in that framework, the first thing you have to do is create the right culture, a culture where we actually aren't pitting teammates against each other, which happens too often. Yeah. And you got to recruit people who are both talented, but can cheer for other talented people, right? And that's very hard to do as well. And then the third thing is there's actually an entire model of preparation that allows you to be mentally in the game when the spark occurs, which allows you to capture sparks that others miss. And we use great examples from great leaders in all three of those kind of pre-spark elements that teach you that you can actually then engineer the moment. And then as the moment comes, it could be small, but you can treat it as if it's large. And if you do so, you can actually, as we said, you can create momentum where other people might be sitting back and wondering, when's my spark going to happen?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of times, people are like, oh, you were just in the right place at the right time. Right. And there is a lot of truth to that, but it's also recognizing the right place, right? And taking action, isn't it?
Yeah, in fact, so one of our great interviews, one of my favorite interviews in the entire book, we did 250 interviews with great leaders, was with a basketball coach named Buzz Williams. Buzz was the coach at Texas A&M last few years. He's now the coach at Maryland. But Buzz, all off season long, You're walking by his office, you're one of his players. He'll say, "Hey, John, get in here." And he'll pop open the laptop, and on his laptop, he'll have a contest, a competitive contest that's being played. And it's often not in basketball, right? It could be women's volleyball. It could be softball, baseball, football. And what he wants is for the player to sit down. He opens up the laptop, hits play, and then he lets them watch 6 to 7 minutes of the contest. Then he closes the laptop and he said, "Tell me exactly what is the time left in the game right now? What's the score in this very moment that I just closed the laptop, and who has momentum on their side? And explain to me why you believe that." And what he wants is he wants to build within his players this acute awareness, right?
Yeah.
Of what's happening around them, so that as something good happens, they are better in position to grab onto it, do something with it. The business analogy of that would be, those organizations, and there are plenty of them that are very good, that create what if teams, right? A team of executives who sit and on a regular basis are asking themselves, what if? I mean, let's throw something crazy out there. What if the president of the United States decides to throw tariffs on every country in the world and half of our supply chain is gone?
That would never happen.
That would never happen.
Why are we even talking about that?
But if it were to happen, what would we do, right?
Yeah.
What if the CEO of our greatest competitor is suddenly caught on a big screen at a Coldplay concert, hugging up on his HR director? What if? I mean, that would never happen, right? Nobody would ever do that. But the truth is, if you can start thinking about what if concepts, what it does, forget whether those are the exact same things that happen. The concept is that we collectively are constantly thinking about the world as our playing field. And when you're thinking about the world as your playing field, you have a greater opportunity to capture those moments when they come.
So we've been talking about catching momentum and, engineering momentum. What are some ways that you found that people actually, probably not intentionally, but actually kill momentum?
Oh, well, one of the easiest ways to kill momentum is to not recognize it when it happens,
Sure.
right? So something comes along, an opportunity, and you sit and you're busy chuckling because you're thinking, how crazy is that? And instead of capturing and using the moment to your advantage, you're laughing about it, and pretty soon the moment's gone, right?
Yeah.
They're called sparks for a reason. They don't last unless you built the kindling, which is all the work you do in advance, and you fan the flames, which is what you do after the spark takes hold. And so this idea but the other ways you can kill momentum, let's say you recruit people and that are so I-centered that if I'm not the reason the good things are happening, then I'm not happy.
Yeah.
And the way you discover this is the next time you as a group are celebrating someone on your team that just did something fantastic. They made a massive sale. They closed a deal. They dislodged a competitor. Look for the A players on your team. Where are they in that celebration? Are they at the front, high-fiving the guy or the woman that makes this deal? Or are they in the back grousing that, damn it, that should have been my deal, right? Should have been my opportunity. And you start to realize what you have. If you don't have people who can celebrate each other, in the world of neuroscience, there's a whole discussion around what are called mirror neurons, which is how, we've all seen somebody walks into a room and yawns, other people suddenly start yawning, right? Mirror neurons we mimic a situation if we feel like we're connected to it. Well, if I feel like your success is to my detriment, then the mirror neurons in the room are actually quite negative, right? And people pick up on that. And suddenly the vibe changes. And that's a way to kill momentum, by the way.
Were there any examples of people that you've spoken with over the years? Sometimes you have to make a change that is really hard because you sense, hey, the market's going this way. Or, I remember talking to some folks in advertising in newspapers, in the early days.
Newspapers?
Yeah.
I
in
know.
the early days.
My kids still laugh at me that I still grab the New York Times when I'm going through an airport.
But, they were laughing in the early days of, the web, and it's like this Craigslist thing's a joke. And, pretty much because that they wouldn't make the move early to say, we got to kill classified ads and make them free because, they're going to eat our lunch if we don't. And so sometimes, grabbing that momentum or that opportunity that's obvious means you're going to kill the golden goose, So did you talk to anybody that really, saw momentum as a real negative to begin with, but as where the market was inevitably headed?
Well, yeah, momentum. I mean, momentum is when you have the wind to your back, right? That's what momentum is. If you want positive momentum. So if you feel the wind is coming to your front, then and you might need to turn and make a change. I mean, there are a couple of companies that we focused on who built momentum after pretty significant layoffs of employees. Like they had to make the hard choices, but in order to get right for the market, in order to get right to be able to capture the next opportunity in the market, they couldn't have it. And so yes, uncomfortable as that was, it was the choice that helped them be ready for an upcoming opportunity to expand that opportunity and create that wind to their back.
How do you measure momentum? I mean, in some cases, there's certainly very tangible results like revenue's up, things like that. But I suspect that some of it's sort of incremental. Are there metrics, that you can say, this means we have momentum?
No, because momentum at its core is a state of mind, right? It's a belief system. At its core, that's what momentum really is. There's a scientific version of momentum, right? Which you would when you see, a swinging of a pendulum or whatever, there's a scientific version of that. But in real life, momentum at its core is a belief system. So how do you measure belief system? By the number of people who are participating in it, right? If you're the leader and you're the only one that believes, you don't really have momentum because you need as a group, you have to be able to move into moments. You have to, remember that question I wrote at the beginning, how do you turn a moment into momentum? And there was a lot of the preparation piece, having the right people on your team. The recruiting piece is one of the few places in the book where we went with a negative as an example. And the story we share was, you may or not remember, when Michael Jordan retired for the first time from the Chicago Bulls, for all those years, Scottie Pippen had been his Robin, right? He was Batman, Scottie was Robin. And Scottie Pippen kind of objected to that. He really wanted to be Batman. He believed he was worthy. So suddenly Jordan's out of the picture and Scottie is Batman. And that first season, Scottie as Batman is okay, good. But when they get to the playoffs, they're in a key game against the New York Knicks, 2 seconds left. Phil Jackson calls a timeout. Scottie Pippen's like, I'm Batman. I'm going to take the shot right now to put us over the top because that's what I've been waiting for. Jackson designs a play for Tony Kukoc to take the shot. Scottie Pippen refuses to get off the bench. He's like, I'm not even going to the game. If you didn't call the play for me, I've waited all these years. Now it's my turn, and you're going to give the shot to Tony Kukoc? And Pippen refused to get off the bench. No one on his team ever saw him the same way again. In fact, to this day, if in the NBA you commit a very selfish act as a teammate, it's referred to as pulling a Pippen, right? Because Scottie Pippen was so absorbed with the idea that it had to be his. Obviously in the NBA, you picked players, you contract with them. So it's not like you can dump Pippen, but what they saw immediately was that he was not and could not be the leader of that team. And so, when you're picking people to put on your team, pick people who can be happy when somebody else does well, just as they would be happy if they did it as well for themselves.
So, the thing about sports is, there's a winner and there's a loser, right? In a game. In business, it's not quite so clear.
I would argue that you may not, there's maybe not a scoreboard that is broadcast to the world, but most often internally, we know the scoreboard. I was working with a company last week, a massive, international company, and they can look at many of their products that they are currently in the marketplace with, and where they were once the leader of the pack in that product line. In many of them, they are not anymore.
Yeah.
Now, to the world, they're a fantastic brand. Everybody knows who they are. But internally, they know they have lost momentum, right? They have lost that others are taking their space. There are scoreboards. They just may not be always as public as we're used to in sports.
So a great deal of your career and your very successful books have been as a biographer. Would that be the right term?
Yeah, I'm a teammate with Deion Sanders and
right.
all kinds of other people to help tell their stories.
So for this book, you probably didn't go live with any CEOs for a couple months or anything. What's been your tool to kind of extract these stories from some of the folks?
I think what happened was many people were fascinated by the curiosity of the idea that, again, in sports, we see momentum. Oh, everybody, the other team has momentum, right? Oh, we have momentum.
Yeah. Broadcasters say it all the time.
Exactly.
Games, right?
It's as great. It's as used a word as there is in broadcast. But in business and in other places, it's known but not studied. It's not been studied.
Right.
And so the idea that I was coming at it, and that I was coming at it from 4 verticals, right? It was, because we look at it, how some of the greatest generals on the planet sit down with us to talk about how you build momentum into your game, into your battle plan, right? How do you create small victories to win momentum? And then business, some of the great business leaders, politics, James Carville, Karl Rove sat down with us to talk about how do you build momentum into a campaign to win an election. You want to peak at the right time, obviously. And so all of these were just fascinating conversations. And when people find out who else you're talking to, most people of significance kind of want to be in. They want to be in that conversation. So, oh, wait, you got, I'd like to talk next, basically.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening to this, a leader's listening to this, and they want to make it a part of their culture, because I think I hear that as much as anything, you got to get as many people to believe, well, that's probably the definition of culture. Is there a single habit or ritual that you'd tell somebody, okay, you have to start this week?
I think what you have as a habit among those that, again, I'm the voice of the people that I had the chance to interview, was you speak truth into the conversation every week. If people start thinking that you're blowing smoke, that you're spinning the numbers, that you're creating, like the company I was talking about last week, if the CEO were to walk in and say, guys, we are right on the edge of just kicking the world by the tail, everybody in the room would know the CEO was not telling the truth. So they were either disconnected from the truth or a liar. And you want to be neither of those things if you're a leader. And so one of the most important things you have to do every week is speak truth into the situation so that you can then create a vision that others believe is possible. And that's where you begin to create that belief system.
Yeah, and I imagine for a lot of leaders, that's hard because
it's very hard.
They're looked up. You're supposed to have all the answers.
Right.
You're like taking us someplace great, right? And so for them to admit, I don't have all the answers, or maybe things aren't going like we thought, can be really tough, can't it?
It can be, but the alternative is an absolute loser.
Well, Don, I appreciate you taking a few moments to stop by the Duct Tape Marketing Podcast. Is there someplace you'd invite people to? I know you have your own podcast.
Corporate competitor.
Love people to listen to, and then obviously find out about the new science of momentum.
Yeah. Just donyaeger.com, and DONYAEGER.com is the best place. And because I know a lot of people misspell my last name, I own all iterations of my last name on the internet. And so, I welcome your listeners to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, again, appreciate you stopping by, and hopefully we'll run into you again one of these days soon out there on the road.
Good, John. Thank you.